I have a folder that I keep on my mirror in my bathroom, and it's a picture of my mom. She passed away just about 6 months ago. And it reminds me of her. She had beautiful red hair. She always loved red hair. And she got a couple granddaughters that have fiery red hair, and that just made her proud as much. But my mother died just a little over 6 months ago, at the age of 88. And the path that she's traveled wasn't always easy. It had twists and turns and valleys and mountains, and there were things that marked her from her childhood, difficult things. But through it all, there was a defining event in my mom's life. It was really a crossroads, so to speak, that she came to, and she made the decision which direction she was going to go at that crossroads. And I want to read you an excerpt from her obituary that was read at her service at Lincoln Marina about 6 months ago. My mom's name was Shirley. Shirley trusted Jesus as her Savior in June 1958 at the conclusion of a worship service at Scottsbluff Berean Church. From the second grade on, when she visited a Sunday school class with a friend and heard about Jesus, she wanted to know Jesus. Praying was an important part of her growing up years. She would pour out her heart to the Lord. At age 28, a mother of 2 boys, she finally got the answer to her life's question. That Jesus had died to forgive her sin and be her Savior, and she needed to exercise her faith, to put her faith in Him, and she did that. June 1958. I was just a year old. And that decision at that crossroads determined the direction of the rest of her life. 62 years ago this month, my mom decided to take God as His Word. She decided she could believe that what God said was true. She said, I'm in. I'm going to believe God. It's going to affect the direction that I go. I'm going to walk His path. I'm going to go His way. And the other path holds nothing for me. And I can tell you, as a young boy growing up, I saw my mom live that out in every aspect of her life. The way she raised my brother and I, the way she invested her time, the way she loved people. I can remember as a little boy going with her 2 blocks up the street to the Mitchell nursing home. And my mom taking her Bible, and we'd go up to the rooms of some of these older women, well advanced in years, and my mother would read the Bible to them and pray with them. I was just small. I was preschool. I remember that picture. I can remember a lot of pictures, but my mother decided that there was nothing that was going to hold her back from that path. She lived out her faith. The fact that she walked God's path was evident by her desires, her actions, her choices. And when she came to the end of her life, she was satisfied and she was fulfilled. She was ready. The thing that I remember most of that night, that Thursday night, we had gotten her checked into hospice just late that afternoon. She was sitting in her chair, and there was almost immediately a release. She just relaxed, and she slept for a couple hours in her chair, and then it was an effort to get her up and to get her into a wheelchair, to get her moved back to the hospice bed that they set up back in the bedroom. And my dad and I put her to bed. I said to my dad, we went out, she was settling down, we went out to the kitchen. I said, Dad, I don't think Mom's going to get out of bed. But there was a sense of release and peace as she went to bed that night. She was satisfied and fulfilled. She was ready. And I said to the hospice nurse, who came a little bit later and helped give her some morphine and things, and then came back the next morning, I said, no regrets. My mom had no regrets. She was ready because we put her to bed that night. Early the next morning, she woke up in the presence of Jesus. Very little struggle. I've been looking for the last 6 months for that web page where you can sign up to go back. If you find it, please give me the address, would you? Where you get to go to sleep at night and wake up in the presence of Jesus the next morning. That's the one I want. We don't all get that book, do we? That's the way she went. And she woke up in the presence of the one who changed her life. She started the next leg of the journey called eternity. And this morning, I want you to understand something. My mother is very much alive. Now, she's gone from this life. But she started that new journey in the next life that we call eternity in the presence of Jesus. You see, the reality is when my mother was 28 years old, she came to a fork in the road. And there were only two ways she could go. She could go God's way, or she could go the world's way. She tried the world's way. She'd seen the heartache and the suffering in her family of going the world's way. She grew up in a family that was impacted by alcohol and a lot of hurt because of that and pain because of that. Now God had begun to change that, and it was a joy to see my grandpa and grandma trust Jesus shortly after my parents. And I got to sit in church with them in a pew with my family. And my other grandma and grandpa come to faith in Jesus. They all decided as adults to follow God's way, to follow God's path. Last week we looked at Psalm 1. We saw there the imagery that David, the author of the Psalm, said there's really only two ways. There's the way of the blessed, and there's the way of the wicked. There's God's way, and there's the world's way. And last week in Psalm 1, we began to develop that theme, and we're coming back to another psalm, Psalm 37 this morning, that gives that same idea, the way of the righteous or the redeemed, and the way of the wicked, the one with no personal relationship with Christ. My mom decided God tells the truth. How about you? Do you really believe that God tells the truth? What you do with that question is going to define how you live. I want you young people to think about that for a minute. What you do with the question about whether God really tells the truth is going to define the decisions you make. And I'm looking at some of you children and teenagers. In the next 10 years, your life is going to change dramatically. Some of you are going to graduate from high school, you're going to go to college, you're going to get married. You won't have 10 kids yet in 10 years, but some of you, want to have 12 kids, 10, 12 kids, right, Sarah? Something like that. And your life is going to change dramatically in 10 years. And the path that you choose to go is going to make all the difference. Let's turn in our Bibles. If you brought your Bibles or your phones, feel free to look it up on your phone to Psalm 37. In this series we're calling Transparent, we see this recurring theme come up again in Psalm 37, that there are only two ways. There are two paths. Let me read for you the first 11 verses, as we're just going to focus on those 11. It's a long psalm. It's 40 verses long. We're not going to take time for all those verses. We're just going to look at the first 11. Let me read them for you as we dive into this psalm, Psalm 37. It starts with a negative, just like Psalm 1 did. Don't worry about the wicked, or envy those who do wrong. For like grass, they soon fade away. Like spring flowers, they soon wither. Trust in the Lord and do good. Then you will live safely in the land and prosper. Take delight in the Lord, and He will give you your heart's desires. Commit everything you do to the Lord. Trust Him, and He will help you. He will make your innocence radiate like the dawn, and the justice of your cause will shine like the noonday sun. Be still in the presence of the Lord and wait patiently for Him to act. Don't worry about evil people who prosper, or fret about their wicked schemes. Stop being angry. Turn from your rage. Do not lose your temper. It only leads to harm, for the wicked will be destroyed, but those who trust in the Lord will possess the land. Soon, the wicked will disappear, Though you look for them, they will be gone. The lowly will possess the land and will live in peace and prosperity. So David is the author of this psalm. Again, as he authored Psalm 1, he authored Psalm 37. And he starts out with the negative. He says, don't worry and don't envy the wicked. Now, we've talked about this last week. Who is the wicked? It's not the murderer on death row, necessarily, though they fit into that broad category. It's not the drug addict or the drug dealer or the criminal. The wicked, by Psalm's definition, is the one that is not in covenant relationship with God. He's the one that is living life on his own. Really, the wicked can be defined as anybody who's choosing to go his own way, as opposed to God's way. He's become his own God. He's navigating life in his own wisdom, in his own power, in his own strength. And David calls him the wicked, because he's not in personal relationship with the God that made him. So don't think of this as an offensive term, although the reality is all of us in our hearts are wicked in and of our own selves. When we make our own effort to go our own way, to do our own thing, to get to God on our terms, we're wicked. Now, it's stinging. We don't like that concept. We don't like that term, but it's true. Because it means we're doing our own thing. We're not in personal relationship with God. We're not going His way. So David says of the wicked, don't worry. And that word worry really means don't get angry, or don't worry, or don't be angry when you see that this person seems to be prospering, and don't envy those that do wrong. Why? Why not? Why not worry about that? You know, we are seeing some interesting things on the news these days, aren't we? We're seeing the rewriting of history. We're seeing 200-year-old statues topple because people don't like what part they played in history. We're seeing the revision of history. We're seeing a major section of the downtown of Seattle taken over by people that say, we're in charge now. David says, don't worry. Don't get angry. Because, verse 2, for like grass they soon fade away, like spring flowers they soon wither. This recurring theme, we see it all throughout this psalm, we see it through the Psalms, is the wicked are here today and gone tomorrow. Everything about the way of the wicked is temporary. It's transient. It doesn't satisfy the heart. It's not the right way. And so David says, if you're on God's way, don't get angry, don't get worried, don't envy the wicked, because they're here today and gone tomorrow. Now, David knew what the hot winds were like that blew off the desert, the Negev desert. In Palestine, in Jerusalem, where his palace was, they were at an elevated height in Jerusalem. But you left Jerusalem and you went down to the Jordan Valley, several thousand feet, and then you crossed the Jordan, you got into the Negev desert. Into desert area, harsh, rugged, rocky soil. And when the rain would fall, the seeds that gathered in the crevices and in the low places would immediately spring up. The moisture with the sun and the heat would cause the grass to spring up and the flowers, the wildflowers to spring up. But then when the arid desert wind would come, literally one night, the grass could be green and the flowers could be bloomed, and by the next day, they would be shriveled to brown nothing. That's the imagery David uses. Like grass, they soon will fade away. Like spring flowers, they soon wither. Don't envy them. Don't get angry at the person on the other way. Because they're here today. And they're gone. But instead, he says, take the other way, God's way. The way of the righteous, the one who puts their trust in the Lord, believe that He says that He tells you the truth. Take His way. He goes on to say, trust in the Lord and do good. Then you will live safely in the land and prosper. I like the way the New American Standard translates that second phrase. Dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness. Trust in the Lord and do good. Stay put, dwell in the land, put roots down, cultivate faithfulness. I've been in a frenzy of pulling weeds in my garden. My plants are finally up. They're beginning to thrive. I've got blossoms on my zucchini and my summer squash. And my vines are starting to spread out. I've been cultivating. Trust in the Lord and do good. What does it mean to trust in the Lord? What is trust? Janet talked about faith. Believing some things we can't see. Faith is like that. How do we have faith in what we can't see? We do it all the time. Roger, when you came and sat down in that pew, did you get down on your knees and check the screws underneath to make sure they were going to hold? No, you plopped down, didn't you? Like a tired guy. Worked too hard. We trust things. We plop down. We put our weight on those. We have all kinds of faith in all kinds of things all the time. But David says, trust in the Lord. To take God as His word is what it means to trust. To believe that God tells the truth. That He is trustworthy. That He's worthy of our trust. You know what the outflow of faith is? It's to do good. Trust in the Lord and do good. The impact of faith and trust is that we care about people around us. It delivers us from our selfishness. When we trust in the Lord, we're not self-focused, but we're others-focused. We give, we serve, and we live safely, or we dwell in the land. This is mentioned 7 times in this psalm, this idea of dwelling in the land. It was a big deal to Israel. You see, David wrote this psalm around 1000 BC after they'd conquered their enemies and they'd taken control of the land that God had promised Abraham 1000 years before. Just kind of a way to hang your hat on the dates of the Old Testament. God made a covenant with Abraham in 2000 BC. The height of Israel was 1000 BC under David. Jesus came in around about 3 BC. So, about 1,000-year equivalents from Abraham to David to Jesus. 2,000 years before Jesus, the Lord promised Abraham in the Abrahamic covenant 3 things. Blessing, seed, or descendants, and land. He said, I'm going to make you a great nation. I'm going to bless you, and those that bless you, I'll bless, and those that curse you, I'll curse. God said to Abraham, you're going to be the father of my people. I'm going to bless you. And I'm going to give you a descendant. And Abraham thought, whoa, I'm 75 years old. God said, that's no problem for me. I'm going to give you a descendant. And your descendants are going to be like the sand of the sea and the stars of the sky. And God fulfilled that. But He said, I'm going to give you land. There's been dispute for thousands of years over that little thin strip of land called Israel today. God promised Abraham 2,000 years before Christ, 4,000 years ago now, that I'll give you that land. And so that imagery, now they're in the land. When David writes this, God said, this is your land. This is the promised land. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. I'm going to give it to you. It's going to be yours. And David was the king. And he says, the one who trusts in the Lord can live safely in the land. And really the imagery that David is using here as he talks about the spiritual aspect of dwelling in the land, he's talking about the benefits of abiding in that personal relationship. The one in covenant relationship with God has tremendous benefits. He can dwell in the land. He can live safely there. He's really referencing the benefits of salvation. The personal relationship that starts in covenant relationship with God by faith in Jesus for us as New Testament saints, but it continues through eternity. I told you my mom didn't really die. She transitioned. Yeah, she left her earthly body. We pronounced her dead, that her old body was laid to rest, but her spirit immediately went into the presence of Jesus, according to 2 Corinthians 5, and she continued to live. And she's very much alive today in eternity. She is enjoying the land forever. You know what's crazy? The day is going to come when my mom gets to come back to this earth. I don't have time to go into all the details of that, but the day is going to come when Jesus is going to destroy this earth and He's going to create a new heaven and a new earth. And do you realize this is where we're going to spend eternity? On the earth. It's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. Sin is going to be eradicated. It's going to be wiped out. The lion's going to lay down with the lamb. It's going to be amazing. And we're going to dwell in the land for eternity. That's the imagery that David has here to the people of Israel. But we see it fulfilled in the finished work of Christ, and we have that to look forward to in eternity. So he says, the one that takes God at His word and trusts in the Lord can dwell in the land. Now, let me ask you a question. Are your days filled with worry and fear and anger and frustration and envy? You don't have to answer that out loud. But I want you to think. Are your days filled with worry and fear and anger and frustration and envy? If they are, you're not trusting God. If that was what characterizes your life, you're not trusting God. Because to take God at His word and to trust Him is to dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness. It's to do good. It's not to fear. It's not to get angry about the wicked. You're to take Him at His word. If you're not believing Him and taking Him at His word, then what characterizes your life is worry and fear and anger and frustration and envy. And so, you're at a crossroads. You've got to decide. Are you going to trust in God or are you going to take Him at His word? Let's continue on. In verse 4 he says, take delight in the Lord, and He will give you your heart's desires. God made you with desires. It's not wrong. Wyatt desires to ride his dirt bike. He likes the wind blowing through his hair. He likes the rush of the adrenaline when he's out riding. I think he comes by that honest. He got that from his dad. Desires aren't wrong. I've heard Kaylee say before she wants to marry a rich man. That's not wrong. Desires aren't wrong. They're God-given. God made us with desires. You know, some of the times in the Christian life, what we project as preachers and what the church projects is, oh, you shouldn't want nice things. You shouldn't have those desires. That's not true. God puts desires in our hearts. But you see, we have to decide how we're going to meet those desires and how we're going to fulfill those desires. There are only two ways. Notice he says, take delight in the Lord, and He'll give you the desires of your heart. To take delight, the word delight means to indulge, to pamper, to enjoy luxury. He says, enjoy the pampering, the luxury, the indulgence in your relationship with God on that path. And He'll give you the desires of your heart. But there's another way. There's another path, and this world is constantly hammering you saying, oh no, don't go on God's path, it's boring. It's not fun. In fact, a lot of times, and I confess that this is probably been true of me as people have watched me, it's like, well, you know, I'm on God's path, so I can't do that. But we kind of look over there with some wantonness and envy, and man, it sure looks like you're having a lot of fun on that other path. They get to do things that I don't get to do, and man, that sure looks like a good time over there. And no, I'm a Christ follower. I gotta just trudge this path. It's kind of boring. It's kind of lonely. There's not a lot of fun on it. No, that could be further from the truth. But that's what the world tells us. You guys, you're out of step, man. You don't get to have your fun. You need to come over and walk on our path. You see, there's taking delight in the Lord and delighting in Him and believing Him that His way is good. And He's going to give you the desires of your heart. He's going to give you meaning and fulfillment and pleasure on His path. That path of obedience and rest. Or there's the way of the wicked. But the wicked becomes his own God. And since he's not trusting in the Lord, and he has to figure out, how to meet his own needs and how to satisfy the desires of his heart. How does he do that? Well, he tries money. Or he tries sex. Or he tries status. Or he tries career. Or he tries body image. Or he tries alcohol. Or he tries work. Or he tries pleasure. Or he tries activity. And he drives himself to the point of exhaustion trying to delight in that path. It doesn't work. It looks good for a time. Look at that guy's boat. Look at that guy's truck. Look at that guy's house. Look at that woman's figure. But remember what David says? Here today, gone home. The wicked's like grass. It looks like he's having fun over there. I kind of envy him. But the next day when I look back, he's gone. Nothing to show for his life. David says, take delight in the Lord. He'll give you the desires of your heart. Don't think that God's way is boring, young people. Don't think that God's way doesn't have any fun. It couldn't be further from the truth. God's way is the right way. It's a good way. It's fulfilling. So how do you get the desires of your heart then? If God's way is the way to get the desires of your heart, how do you get it? David answers the question in verse 8. Commit everything you do to the Lord. Trust Him. Take Him at His word. Trust Him. Believe He tells you the truth. Trust Him. And He will help you. You see, in order for us to enjoy the benefit and the blessing of God's path, we have to trust Him. We have to commit our way to Him. Everything we do, we have to commit to Him. Commit everything you do to the Lord. To commit or to trust or to nail down. God tells me the truth. Not one foot in the world and one foot in Christ. One of the most damaging things for God's people is to try and live on both paths. It discredits God's path and it disillusions those that are following. A lot of young people feel the pressure of the world. So at school during the week and on Friday nights they live on the world's path. And then they put their face on, they come to church, and they sing the songs and they act like they're on God's path. That's miserable existence. Won't work. It's not that way. Commit everything you do to the Lord. Nail it down if God tells you the truth. This is my path. The path of the believer holds nothing for me. He's here today, he's gone tomorrow. It's transient. It's temporary. It's not satisfying. I'm satisfied in God's way. I'm satisfied on His path. I won't worry and fear and be angry and frustrated or envy the wicked. I'll trust in the Lord. If you do that, how do you know that it works? You say, man, I'm young. That's a huge risk. To commit everything I do to the Lord. What if it's the wrong direction? What if it's the wrong path? What if I don't win that way? Oh, David says you will win. It'll become abundantly clear. It'll be obvious to everybody that looks at you. Verse 9. He will make your innocence radiate like the dawn, and the justice of your cause will shine like the noonday sun. David references two daily events that have happened every day for thousands of years since God created the heavenly body of the sun. What happens every morning with the sun, Cameron? What does the sun do every morning? It comes up. Do you get a vote now? You don't get to tell the sun when to come up, do you? It comes up. There's no stopping it. And then it raises to the center, and during these days, this is corn growing weather, isn't it? That hot 95-degree weather, you can about see the corn growing. At the noonday sun, there's no denying its heat. He says, you go on God's path, it's going to be so abundantly clear. It's going to be so evident to all that look on. You see, He will make your innocence radiate like the dawn. You'll see the sun come up. Just like that's a testimony of God's faithfulness. You walk His way, you're going to be like that. You're going to have the radiance, the brilliance, the beauty of the dawn. And He'll make your justice, He'll make the justice of your cause shine like the noonday sun, the brilliance, the heat, the brightness of the noonday sun. It'll become obvious, just like dawn and noonday, that you're on His path. There's going to be no hiding it. When you trust the Lord, all are going to see, all are going to marvel at your peace and your purpose. You know what the reality is? The one on the world's path looks over with envy and wanting at you because he sees, look at the peace and the security of that person. They're not striving. They're not chasing the wind. They seem fulfilled. They don't have much. I don't get it. They don't have much. But they're always rejoicing. They're kind. They're doing good. They seem at peace in their heart. Verse 7, be still. By the way, I said that was verse 8. That's because my one eye told me it was 8. My other eye told me it was 6, and I couldn't read my numbers on my page. I get this eye worked on this week, so I'm hoping they can start agreeing rather than fighting each other. But that was verse 6 before now. Verse 7, it says, be still in the presence of the Lord and wait patiently for Him to act. Now, on God's path, everything doesn't happen just the way you want it to in your time. If you've walked with Jesus for any length of time, you know that you don't get it put in your order and He does everything like you want. He's not a genie in a bottle. You don't tell God, I want these 3 wishes, and He says, oh, okay, I'll do it just the way you want. That's not the way it works. You see, to the one on God's path, he needs to be still in the presence of the Lord and wait patiently for God to act. Sometimes we must be still and wait patiently. Waiting is never easy. But to the one on God's path, he says, I'm committed to God's path. I'll wait. I don't understand. This is like a turn in the road. I can't see the destination. This is a dark valley. Does the path go through the valley? Oh, it does. It goes through the valley. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for thou art with me. David writes in Psalm 23. We can study that later this summer. You have to wait patiently. I'm in it for the long haul. Even though I don't know when and how God will act, I'm going to wait patiently. I'm going to be still before the presence of the Lord. I'm going to trust Him. At the end of verse 7, he says, don't worry about evil people who prosper or fret about their wicked schemes. Stop getting angry. Turn from your rage. Do not lose your temper. It only leads to harm. For the wicked will be destroyed, but those who trust in the Lord will prosper or possess the land. So the wicked will disappear. Though you look for them, they will go. The lowly will possess the land and will live in peace and prosperity. Recurring themes. Recurring themes. The wicked, here today, gone tomorrow. But the one who trusts in the Lord is going to possess the land. He's got an eternal plan for you. It starts with personal relationship with Jesus. It goes through this life, and it doesn't end here. When you transition to eternity, it continues, and we're going to come back and live here in the land for eternity. We're going to possess the land. You see, God's way is a good way. Are you trusting God? The heart of the matter is, do you believe that God tells the truth? It makes all the difference. Young people, what you decide about that question is going to determine where you're at in 10 years. It's going to become abundantly obvious in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Not just for the young people, for some of us old people, for some of you middle-aged people. What you decide about the 2 paths, what you decide about whether you can trust God and take Him at His word is going to make all the difference and that it's going to become abundantly clear. A little over 10 years ago, God asked us to trust Him with our firstborn, our oldest daughter. She was finishing up university. She graduated at the top of her class. She got 1 B in freshman English in college. She was brilliant. She student taught at the largest elementary school in Nebraska, and they loved her. And at the end of her student teaching, they offered her a contract. They said, you can have your own 3rd grade classroom if you want to work for us. She called me up and she said, Dad, they offered me a teaching position. They offered me a contract. I've got it in my hand. I said, well, what are you going to do? You know, the way of the world would have said to her, security, prosperity. You're a 21-year-old girl, and you can have a contract with benefits and blessings and all kinds of opportunities. Get going, girl. Sign that contract. Go that way. But then she said to me, but Dad, I don't know that I want to sign the contract. I said, why not? It's a great opportunity. You studied education. You get your own classroom. Why would you not want to sign the contract? Because I want to go to Peru. I said, what? You want to go to Peru? What do you mean? Well, I'm interested in that school down there that teaches English to Peruvian kids, and I'd like to go down and check that out. Fast forward, we said, okay, go check it out. She loved it. She raised her finances to go back there. It's been over 10 years ago. She's in charge of a bunch of English teachers. She administrates the English teaching program. She's had 4 children. One of them only survived for 30 minutes. She carried Joshua to term. She delivered him. He only lived for 30 minutes, and he went into the presence of Jesus. You see, sometimes we have to be quiet before the Lord and wait patiently. This path isn't without twists and turns, but it's a good path. And 10 years later now, we look back and we thank God for 3 beautiful grandchildren that are Peruvian, and our daughter that's embraced Peru as her home and married a Peruvian and is impacting hundreds of Peruvian kids for eternity. It's good. God's path is good. You get to choose which path you take. Now let me be honest and sober with you here at the end. Sadly, some of you today aren't going to buy it. See, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid, man. You Christians are boring. I don't buy it. Well, let me warn you today. The path you take is going to become abundantly clear in the days ahead. And some of you are ready to bail on this Christianity thing. You're not sure you believe your parents. You're not sure you believe the pastor. You're not sure you believe biblical Christianity. You're getting bored. You're not excited. You're looking whimsically over at that other path saying, man, they're having a lot more fun over there than I am. And you're going to jump fence and you're going to bail and you're going to run over there, so to speak. But in 10 years, your life's going to be shipwrecked. Some of you may pass away because of foolish decisions, because you chose that path. Some of you are going to come back broken and divorced. Single mom, single dad, because you made a decision that you weren't so sure that God's way was a good way. I want to do my own thing. I want to be my own God. I want to turn my own direction. You're going to be disillusioned with life, and it's going to be painfully evident. And there's not going to be any joy, and there's going to be regrets. And some of you will remember this morning. And you'll say, I wished I had taken God at His word. I wished I had trusted God. I wished I had gone on His path. But I didn't. And I've got the scars to prove it. And the pain to prove it. Now here's the great thing about God's invite you back onto his path at any moment. You can go your own way, you can do your own thing. He lets you. But he's constantly saying, back, come on over here. This is the good way. This is the right way. And he's patient. And he's gracious. But today, you've got a decision. Which way are you going to go? God's way or your way? You're going to follow his path or your own? It'll become abundantly clear when you decide. The real issue is, do you believe God tells you the truth? When he says to trust you, trust him, go his way, it's good, it's fulfilling, it's meaningful. He does. And I'll tell you, 63 this month. I wouldn't trade that path for anything. If I had to go back and do it again, I'd walk it the same. The year after my mom, 3 years after my mom trusted Jesus, I trusted Jesus. But she lived it out. Taught me about it. I didn't understand it all as a 4-year-old, but I said, I want to travel God's path. That's the way I want to go. It's been worth it. No regrets. It's been good. Which way are you? Lord, thank you for your word today. Oh, the Psalms are so rich with truth. And they really apply to us today. Each one today is deciding the direction they're going. Open their eyes to see your paths again. Because you're a good God and you do what's good. You bless us when we follow your ways, when we trust in you, when we take you at your word, and we believe that what you say is true. There's tremendous benefit. May your people walk in your way this week. We pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. We hope you give Friday night, the Chosen series, a chance. We'll tell you more about it on Facebook. We'll get that information out as far as get together Friday night.